Welcome to the From Guilt to Good podcast, where we discuss things that caregivers wish people would talk about, but don't, won't, or can't. Hi, my name is Jeanette Yates, and I was a lifelong caregiver for my mother and founder of The Self Caregiver, where I help caregivers feel good, not guilty. And today I am welcoming Bernadette Evans. I found her on TikTok. She came across my FYP, and I invited her to be on the podcast, y'all, before I even knew her name, because she was dropping some truth bombs that I needed everybody who listens to this podcast to hear. Bernadette, welcome to the podcast. I'm ready to get into it. Are you?
I am, and thanks for having me.
This is going to be so much fun. Okay. So I'm going to let you introduce your caregiving situation so people kind of know what we're up against here. And then we'll dive into the topics that we're going to discuss today. So we are going to be where we can lighten the world on fire here in a minute. But go ahead and tell us what is your caregiving story?
Okay. Well, I am a caregiver to my elderly parents, both of them, and this has been a 10-year journey. And it started with me living on the East Coast. My folks were in my childhood home I grew up in. And for the first few years, that once I became aware that my mom has Alzheimer's, onset of Alzheimer's, I was commuting back and forth between Delaware and Ohio.
Wow.
So yeah,
That's
so yeah, it was a lot. So an 8-hour drive, bi-monthly and then monthly, to check on my folks and everything. At the same time, I was raising. Well, I had two children, but one was still in high school, trying to get him through high school, and then I had to make the decision to either I was going to be in Delaware full time or in Ohio full time, because I couldn't be in both places at once. I ended up moving back home to Ohio with my parents and still trying to navigate raising a child, getting him through school, dealing with my folks and the changes they were going to. But my mom was losing her way driving. So that was it. At that point I had to come here. I do have a sibling that lives 45 minutes, but he was not getting involved in the way that they needed to be. So it fell on me. So I've been living with my folks for the past 7 years, and it has been incredibly, incredibly difficult. I'm fortunate that they're both mobile. So in that case, they can do a lot of things for themselves. And some of the things I do is mainly surveillance. But and it's not the tasks. If you're a caregiver, well, for me, I should say,
Yeah.
it's not necessarily the tasks that
Right.
are difficult to manage. It is the personalities. It is stepping back into family drama, is stepping back into feeling like you're relitigating your adolescence with
Right.
your folks. It's finding your own space, autonomy, privacy, or giving up a lot.
Right.
It's a lot of sacrifice along the way so that my folks can live out their final years that they.
I love that you said that, because that basically cuts through all the BS. Because the bottom line is, I agree with you. I think the hardest part about caregiving is, in addition to obviously watching your parents decline, right? That's
Mhm.
terrible and horrible in its own right. But it is not necessarily the paperwork, dealing with the insurance companies, doctor's appointments, like all that is annoying and
Mhm.
frustrating, but we have to do that for ourselves anyway. It's part, it doesn't, it's more annoying when you're doing it with somebody else. But it is that I love that you said, like, we have to relitigate our adolescence. A lot of people think, or they don't even think about it at all. They think my parents need care. I'm going to step in and I'm going to take over and I'm going to do what needs to be done. And we're going to do it this way and this way and this way. And blah, blah, blah. And
Mhm.
a lot of parents are like, wait, I'm the parent. Who are you?
Mhm. Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so there's even in the most healthy family, there's that dynamic shift that changes. Now, I believe, I don't know if you feel the same way, or maybe it's just semantics, but I do not think that the child becomes the parent. I think caregiving is different than parenting, because that dynamic isn't exactly flipped the way our brain wants it to be.
Mhm.
Or wants to be like, does that make sense?
That makes sense to me perfectly. It really does, because there's no way I could tell my folks, yeah, I'm the parent now.
Right.
You know,
Right.
they still see me as 12. So that's kind of, they don't see that. So I agree with you. It is a different dynamic with caregiving. There is a lot more to it. And, your folks, unless they're really further gone down the road, they still have autonomy. They still have self-agency. They still have the ability to discern or decide. And, they have their will that you gonna be bumping up against
Right.
sometimes.
Right. And I think, and you, like you mentioned, you've been doing this for a decade. I was a long time caregiver for my mother as well. So like I did the
Mm-hmm.
whole raising my kids and taking care of my mom. I did that too. And for the most of the time, she was in full charge of her faculties, made her decisions. I was just kind of the support team,
Mm-hmm.
all that kind of stuff, which was stressful enough. But
Mm-hmm.
that was one of the things that was, I had to, for a long period of time, I had to come to the terms with, I don't have to agree with my mom's decision here. I
Mm-hmm.
just have to support it. Now there did come a time where I supported her right to make the decision, but her decision was affecting my health, my ability to take care of myself, take care of my family, all of those things. And that's where it gets kind of icky. And
Yes.
I think we were talking before I hit record about a time where you were trying to honor your parents' wish to stay in their home,
Mm-hmm.
but also you were burning out and needed more help to
Yeah.
make their wish possible.
Yep.
And so you set a boundary.
I did.
When you talk about it on TikTok, you talk about it as a strike, which
Mm-hmm.
sounds awesome. And every caregiver listening is probably like, oh, we can go on strike. Basically, that's a easy way of saying you set a boundary and you said, this is what I am willing to do. This is what I am no longer willing to do. And, that's how you got through that. But can you just talk a little bit? We already talked about it, but I wasn't
Yeah.
recording. My bad. Tell us a little bit about how you made the decision to get some help and then you enlisted the help of your brother.
Mm-hmm.
And then how you set it up so that you could set that boundary and really hold the boundary. Cause we can all set a boundary.
Yeah.
It's holding it. So
It
talk
is
a little bit
holding.
about how you made that possible.
Yes. Well, as I said, I, as I was telling you, that a year ago in the summer, I kind of had hit my breaking point. I feel like I needed more help. And I was conveying this to my brother while we were on vacation. So I just can't keep doing this. I need a break, got to have help. And so it talked about getting help in the home, just someone to come in, a few hours just to start off. And I think I have mentioned it to my folks, but they don't listen to me. But they'll listen to the golden child, the one that floats down from the cloud and stuff. So he had spoke to them and said, "Look, there's gonna come in, and they're gonna just do a couple hours." And of course, they're all, "Yeah, okay, yeah, that sounds good." And then the second he's out the door, "We're not doing that. We're not doing that." And so we had agreement. I had even gone so far as to hire the woman, and she was scheduled to come. And when I told them she's gonna come on, they're, "Nope, it's just not gonna happen. We're not doing it. Well, you pay for it." I mean, the resistance was just steep. I This is one of the times where I really had to stand my ground, because again, I'm 10 years in. I've been doing this all by
Right.
myself. I can't do it by myself no more. So I said to them, I said, "Okay, let me try one more time." I said, "Look, she's coming in to assist me, give me help, back me up, because I need the help." And that's when my mom said, "Hmm, you don't do anything."
Ugh,
Those were the fighting the words. "I don't
right.
do anything. The only reason you in this house is because of me. That's it." And that hit me so hard in my soul that I said, "Okay, I'm shutting down." In fact, I stopped talking. The argument was over. I went upstairs. I notified my brother. I said, "I'm not doing anything else for your parents. I'm not. I'm not cooking. I'm not cleaning. I'm not driving. No medical appointments. Nothing. Nothing." And as I told you, Now, what I did do was leave some food in the refrigerator, some heat and eat, because there is a difference between, making a point and catching a case. I can't go
Yeah.
that far, making
Right.
a point. But I did not communicate with them. I did not have anything to do with them. 3, 4 days, I was on strike. That means nuts, because they needed to know just how much of the nothing
Right.
that I was doing.
Right.
And the only way to communicate that was, so when the hearing aid batteries weren't getting changed, there wasn't no hot breakfast, the insure was gone. Then it was like, oh, maybe we went too far. And then my mom calmed me down. She somewhat apologized and everything. And okay, maybe it's okay for the lady to come. It's okay. And that was it. And I was on strike 4 days. I made my point, and that lady started working for us.
Well, I
But that,
love that you talk about the boundary you set and then how you were like, well, I mean, I still have to make sure that they're going to be safe and like nourished. They have the, like I got to do that, but I don't have to put up with
mm-mm,
this. And the only way I'm going to get help is if I show them how much they need help. You need help. They need help. I had a similar situation. My mom was very resistant. She ended up being in a nursing home the last 2 years of her life, but she was I mean, from the time she got sick when I was 8, there was this, you never put me in a nursing home, never so there came a time in her health where she was making decisions that were helping her stay at home, which was her goal, but it was very unsafe, right? So,
mm,
she was in and out of rehab because she kept falling and all of these things. And so one time she was in rehab and I don't even remember if we were fighting about nursing home versus no nursing home. I mean, we might have just been fighting about something else. I don't know. We were fighting. And which shocks people to know that my mom and I fought sometimes because like she is a very kind and compassionate was a very kind and compassionate person. But
mm-hmm,
we still would scream at each other from time to time. I went to go leave her rehab room and she said, if you walk out of that room, if you walk out of this room, don't ever come back. And
mm,
I wheeled around and said, do you really mean it? Do you promise? And I left. Now I was devastated. I got to my car. I started sobbing, right? I was hard,
mm-hmm,
but what I decided to do was not go back for a few days.
mm-hmm,
But one, she was in a rehab, so I knew that there was some sort of care for her. And then I called her best friend and I said, Mom and I are mad at each other. I am not going to answer her phone calls or her texts or go see her for 3 days. Do with that information what you will. But like, I just wanted someone to know, like if they call me, I will answer the phone. If the facility calls me, I'll answer the phone, but I'm not answering. It was very cathartic. I don't know if she learned any lessons, but I think it gave us at least enough time to cool down a little bit.
right,
So,
right, right, right,
but there is this sense of like, you can walk away. You may have to pull a few little borders up, like make sure somebody knows or,
mm-hmm,
you know, but it is okay to say, I can't do anymore. And for me, it was a little bit different in your situation that you were talking about, although I think you can relate to this too, because you may be getting there now, like you said, as your parents have continued to decline
mm-hmm,
away. But I had to say to mom, because like her plan was always me to take care of her. I mean,
mm-hmm,
who who doesn't want that, right? We all want our family to take care of us. Of course,
right,
it's not
right,
wrong,
right,
but it's not always possible. And so I had to say to my mom, Mom, I understand that you need X, Y, and Z. I understand that. However, I can only provide X and sometimes Y. I can't do Z at all. So we're going to have to find somebody or a place, depending on like the situation. Like either we're going to have to hire people or you're going to have to go
mm-hmm,
somewhere that can provide you with Y and Z.
mm-hmm,
And, my mom basically was bedridden before she agreed to be in a nursing home.
mm,
But it came to the point where I was like, there is no way for me to physically care for you physically.
Right.
And if you want me to be able to help you through this illness emotionally, I'm going
Mhm.
to have something left in the tank. You mentioned, and I do want to get into this a little bit. You mentioned your brother, how
Mhm.
he, and so we, this is something else. Now, I am an only, I'm my mother's only child.
Mhm.
I didn't have a sibling, which some people are like, lucky you. And then other people, uh, but one thing that's important, and maybe you can speak to this a little bit, like the dynamic is the dynamic.
Mhm.
He's the golden child, you're the caregiver or you're the caretaker or, whatever. That is classic. And I don't want to assign your family with a label, but like just there are dysfunctional family roles,
Mhm.
and those are two of them.
Yes.
So,
Yeah. Yes. Yes. Yes.
and while, you know, I think a lot of people try to like, if they realize they come from a dysfunctional family, a lot of times people don't. They just think that's family. And to some
Mhm.
extent, I think we're all a little dysfunctional, right?
Right. Yeah.
But that stuff doesn't go away
Mm-mm.
when you have to start caring for your aging parents.
Right.
So we automatically fall back on the role that we are accustomed to. So would you say like your brother was the golden child even like back in the day?
Yeah. I think he was
Yeah.
because he was the quieter one. He was not the disruptive one.
Are you
And so
saying you were Bernadette?
I might have been, but just disruptive in the way that, I was just trying to assert my own independence. I wasn't, like a wild troublemaking kid, but again, my parents are from the silent generation. They were born in the 19s.
Wow.
And then yeah. And so my coming of age was the 90s. So imagine the culture clash and
Yes.
dynamics of that. And I was a female who spoke up for myself. I tried to be very independent and I was fighting a very, very traditional things. My dad really felt that I should wear a dress, period. I was a tomboy. So that wasn't going to work. Those type of things. Again, I was very vocal and they found being vocal as being defiant, where
Right.
their thing is children should be seen and never heard.
And probably not
And
even seen that much.
probably not even seen unless absolutely necessary. So yeah, so that very and my daughter asked my mom how were we as kids, and she described my brother was the quiet one and I was the more active one, and that never changed. And I feel like, feel like again, there are times when stepping back in here, not realizing that although I had gotten my undergrad, my master's from Ivy League school, raised kids, been an activist, community leader, all that kind of stuff. That when I came back in here, the perception is of still being a 12-year-old and being still addressed that way and treated that way. And conversely, that I would defer to them from that place of my 12-year-old self. So they should be able to do whatever they want and say whatever they want and have things the way they want whenever they want. And it's like, wait a minute, no, I'm just as grown as you. You know?
I had that epiphany too one time when we weren't really fighting, but like I was doing something and I had the sassiest mouth to my mother as a 40 something year old woman.
Mm-hmm.
And, I was like, you don't, you don't talk to anyone else that way. Why are you, and I just remember thinking it's because I'm acting like I did when I was a teenager. That's exactly what I'm
Mm-hmm.
doing. Like,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and it was
Yeah.
like, okay, so now I need to start, and this may have changed, maybe this kind of changed the way my caregiving worked, and maybe it did for you too, is when I actually stepped into the current day, Jeanette, and
Mm-hmm.
started acting like in your case, the leader, educated,
Mm-hmm.
independent person that you are today,
Right.
the way you give care changes probably for the better,
Mm-hmm.
but it's very hard for the person that you're caring for because they still see you as their child.
Yeah, and you got that, and it's all of that. And someone said to me, it's not what you call me, is how I answer what I answer to." Yeah, it's not what you call me, it's what I answer to. And I feel like when I stepped back in here, I was still answering as that little kid. Even my voice would be a little bit higher when that kind of, that kind of thing. And asking them, is it okay if Aja, my daughter, come and stay or whatever, that, and I'm still feeling like I'm coming from a place of permission and things like that. But it's when I step, it's a wait a minute, I am an adult. And let me come from the adult role. Let me stop asking questions. Let me use declarative statements. This will happen because this is what is going to happen. This is what's occurring, and get rid of that kind of child voice or feeling or and stuff. That's when, and you're right. That's when the caregiving changes because I am coming from my fully formed self. That's the side my parents have a hard time accepting because that's not a part that they can control. When you're little, right? That's a control aspect. But when you're a full grown adult, you can't exert control over another sentient, self identifying feeling adult. Now, they don't have any problem seeing my brother as one, but me, not so much. So, but you're right. So it did when I stepped more into the grown up role and shoes that I am and answering back that way, then well, it took some stress off me. It probably put
Right.
something on them and all. But yeah, that's when you talk about a hard boundary to bust, I think that's the hardest one to crack.
Yeah. I want to talk a little bit more, and you don't have to. We don't have to get too much in your business, but I do think it's important to discuss that sibling dynamic,
Hmm.
whether it because there's many reasons that siblings don't just split the caregiving, right? Like
Yeah.
50-50. There's lots of
Yeah.
different ways, reasons, all that kind of stuff. So
Hmm.
how have you navigated that? Because we can spend a lot of time thinking that the other person should be doing something differently or something more or something whatever, but that doesn't really
Always.
usually doesn't produce fruit. So how do you balance the you know, including them in the care of their parent, but also not waiting on them to do something that they're not going to do? Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. And with my brother, and I'll say a caveat is we're very close. We do get along. We are better now than before. But at the start, when I told my brother what was happening with my parents, and people take different things different ways. Now, I hear a problem. I'm Kim Impossible. Okay, what's the action? What we got to do? What's the plan? And go forward. Now, my brother, he heard the news and he went into denial. This is not happening. It's not real. And everybody has their way of dealing. And he just said,
Exactly.
and I at the beginning was willing to accept that, okay, this is just where he is in his journey right now. So I gave him some grace on that. But then the denial became problematic when, again, in the early stages, I'm in Delaware. I'm 8 hours away. He's 45 minutes away. And I was, hey, can you make it to the folks' house just twice a month,
Right.
every other week? Check on them. Okay, yeah. I was like, you can make that commitment? Yeah. And didn't do it.
Right.
And it's like, well, what's up? Well, I've been busy and stuff like that. Okay. And the first 2 or 3 years, it was like that. And I actually had my daughter was in college in Kent. So she would actually come up and stay with my parents 1 weekend a month. And that gave me some relief. But now I'm, recruiting my kid
Yeah.
who's got in college as part of this caregiving life. And I have to tell you that the resentment for me started to build because I'm doing it. I'm participating. And I don't have the luxury of just, oh well, I'll just pretend it's not there.
Right.
Because mom is disappearing in her car. So, I don't have the luxury of pretending, and I wish I did, and that resentment would grow. Just bit over time, I would try to, reel him in. I need some help. Your folks need you. Can you come? And it was a slow process. And I think this was it. There was he heard me, I think, tell his wife that my son was kind of resentful of the situation because I left him to go take care of my parents.
Yeah.
And at
That
that point,
feeling.
I think, yeah, my brother at that point has made no sacrifice, no extra time. His his kids are the same age as mine. They're not coming up over here to watch grandma like my kids are. So that at that point, I think there was some shame or conviction. I'll put it like
Right.
that, some
Yeah.
conviction. And then he started kind of coming more into the fold and really listened to me and began to get more involved. So it was that incident, and there was actually another incident with my folks that got so bad. I actually had a neighbor had to intervene because it looked like the crisis was going to become physical between my dad and I. And when my brother heard that, he was like, "Okay, I'm in. I'm in." You know. So he's been a lot, and I have to give my when my brother finally got there,
Right.
he would say, "What is it that you want me to do?"
Yeah. Yeah.
And not, "Okay, I'll do this," or "I'll take control," or "You should be doing that." Tell me specifically what it is that I could do. And for a minute, my brain went tilt like, "What?" Okay, you gonna do
Well, and
something?
I think in some case, like, a lot of times when like there's a social media post about like, how do you help a caregiver? It's like, just do something for them. You don't have, like just drop off groceries or just, but like, I think there is a time, especially when it's a sibling situation or somebody that's going to be their help is going to be ongoing, for them to
Mhm,
say, recognize your role as the primary caregiver and say, you tell me what is needed. And then I'll
mhm,
tell you what I can do. And then, we'll figure it out from there. I think that's very helpful. But over the course of watching your stuff on TikTok, I've noticed that, like, despite the fact that there is this kind of, like you said, your parents think of your brother one way and you one way, and there's kind of this thing that you've both managed to figure out a way to be part of the same team
mhm.
when it comes to your parents, even if like maybe you wish that he lived there and you could live, like whatever. I think that's very important too. Like I said, I didn't have the luxury of having anyone else that I could call in it like that.
Mhm,
But I have a lot of friends who are struggling with that dynamic where there's 3, 4 siblings and, they all have different things going on in their lives and their careers and with parenting and all of this stuff. And they're trying to figure out what role each of them play. And I think the most important thing is to just keep having the conversations. Sometimes it takes a while, like you said in your case, like not everybody's going to be on the same page, especially when this whole thing gets started, but don't give up on
mm,
asking for help.
right. And keep asking and requesting and saying this it. And if you can have these conversations before time,
Yes.
because we never know. But I wish we could have, you know, before but we know our parents are gonna get older.
Right.
You know? So it's like, yeah, so what do you think that something should happen to them? Because even early in the beginning, we had two different ideas of what that should look like. Before my parents started having memory issues, my brother was pushing them to sell their house and move to assisted living. I mean, he was
Right.
driving it, pushing
Right.
it, push because his idea of care is, well, you just move over there and
Right.
then we good. And I actually had to pull my brother back and said, now our parents are going to stay in their home as long as it is reasonable,
Right.
logical, as long as it makes sense, and stuff. So again, I'm the reason my folks are still in this home after this time. I do have to say, I am um, glad that my brother and I are now on the same page. We're working more as a team. He has stepped up even more in the past few months, taking my mom to more of her appointments and allowing me to get away. And we had a strong foundation, I think, as kids. And we were still able to kind of overcome that. I know that's not true for everybody. Caregiving really does tear up families
It
from
does.
the rut. And I think if he hadn't jumped on board, I think my resentment would be at a level where we would not be able to communicate,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know.
Well, and I think too, when I talk to caregivers, I do calls with caregivers sometimes. And, we try to work through, I try to help them work through some of those communication issues, getting everybody on the same page, whatever, we try to do that. But then sometimes it's like, okay, now you've got to, you know, we've done what we can. They're not getting on the same page, whatever. Now now it's time to, and this is where we get to dive into really what shook me the first time I heard you say it. We really have to say, okay, apparently I'm the only one doing it. Okay.
Mm-mm.
I'm gonna fine. All right. Now, what can I do without I hope I don't mess up your words. You can correct me. How can I be the best caregiver I can be for my loved ones without sacrificing my health
Hmm.
on the altar of caregiving?
Right.
And, then we have to move to like problem solving and things like that. So
Yeah.
I want to dive into that
Hmm.
part of your caregiving journey and how,
Hmm.
there, of course, there's inherent sacrifice in caring for
Hmm.
someone else and parenting and caregiving. That's part of being in a community, being
Right.
part of
Mm.
family.
Yeah.
But caregivers are notorious
Hmm.
for just setting ourselves on fire to keep the family
Yes.
warm.
Don't we
And
do that?
yeah, it's nutso. And
It is.
parents have a little bit more support, I think, in having the date nights and going to get their, taking care of themselves. And, that, I mean, they still struggle, I think, to some extent, but it is nothing like what caregivers have to deal with, I think. And so I want to talk more about how you came to that realization that you were making sacrifices to your own well being and what are the steps that you took to nip that in the bud.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So I said in one post that one night the four horsemen were coming for me, and I had taken my blood pressure. Uh, had shot up. Now this trigger was because there was an incident. It's been like I feel like a month. It was a month ago now that my dad took a fall, ended up in the hospital. He was in the hospital that I happened to work in. And so I was at his bedside through all of that. So I'm working full time. I was taking care of him. My mom was at home alone. So I still had to run home and look after her and move him from the hospital to rehab, then rehab, and still working, still dealing with him and dealing with my dad's off the chart emotions with that. So 3 weeks into this, I feel like this pulsating in my brain, not a headache, but this is something different. When I checked my blood pressure, I was running at like 165 over 118. I actually went to urgent care. They said, "You are in stroke territory." I was like, okay, you know what? You don't have to tell me twice that that girl, you in trouble. You ain't got to whoopee on me a couple times. That one time was enough. So from there, I said I immediately has said this has to change. I feel like I've made 10 years in. I've made a lot of sacrifices. One of the biggest time with my child, I talked about my kid. All of the early on years, time, ever. I said that's enough. And that's when I said I will not sacrifice my health on the altar of caregiving. I said it's enough. That's enough. So that means the big flashing sign is there
Yeah.
that that if I want to live the long life that my parents had, I gotta right now make the decision that I'm at the top of the line. So I went to the doctor, scheduled physical, booked a trip to go see my kids because I needed a break. That was also a signal for that. And I had made the decision that the aid that I had to go on strike for was going to go from 1 day to 3 days. And then this week I fought this, I fought this, I fought this. I couldn't fight it any longer. I made the decision to acquiesce and begin medication. I have never been on any medication. I'm that, the healthy person and all that kind of stuff. But I've been monitoring my blood pressure, and I can get rid of all the salt, alcohol. What was the other thing? Salt, caffeine, coffee, which, like, oh my gosh, it's like, but I could get rid of all of them. But the trigger is the stress, the 24. So I acquiesce. I'm going to start the blood pressure medication. I have to do that for my health. I am pulling back my duties. The lady who's coming in, she'll be taking over the cooking, take them to more of the appointments. Basically, honestly, I have to disengage as much as I
Right.
can from my parents.
Yeah. I think that's so important because a lot of times I think what frustrates caregivers is, and this is what I found in my own, at the height of my burnout,
Mhm.
I was exercising daily.
Mhm.
I was in a Bible study. I was
Mhm.
writing in a gratitude journal. I was
Mhm.
doing yoga. I was doing
Mhm.
meditation. Blah, 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 and I still, I had pedicures, my eyebrows were done, blah, 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 like whatever. And I was losing my mind, and my
Mhm.
anxiety was through the roof, and
Mhm.
my depression was, I was struggling.
Mhm.
And what I realized is that the self-care that we want as caregivers, like who doesn't want a day off
Mhm.
or a weekend at the beach or girls' night out or date night or whatever. Those are great, but they are not a supplement.
Right.
They do not overtake your
Mhm.
yearly exam and your physical, and if you need dental work, whatever, like
Yes.
these are
Yeah.
the things that really matter, and we lump all of those kind of things in that same category as the more, like, fun stuff, which please go do it. I did it all. That's great.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
it doesn't take over for that health care that we need. And I also think that we have to be, and it sounds like this is where you were at,
Mhm.
no self care, health care or otherwise, health care or fun care will work if you do not believe that you deserve it, if it is
Exactly.
not what your body and mind and emotions are calling for. And
Mhm.
so I love that you mentioned you could do all the things, but it was stress that was
Mhm.
the trigger. And
Mhm.
we want to dance, we want to go on our vacation, or we want to get out and we want to do this kind of thing. But then we come back to the same stressful situation that is dysfunctional and not sustainable. Guess what? We're right back
Mhm.
into burnout. And so that's why I love that you have the things that you set in place allow you to disengage on a regular basis,
Mhm. Mhm.
allow you to take a step back on a regular basis, not
Mhm.
waiting until you're the only disengagement you get is when you're in the ER because you're about to have a stroke.
That's it. That's it. For
That
real.
does
For real.
not count.
It does not count. It does not count. And the fact is that caregiving, all the pedicures and yoga classes are not going to erase the cumulative effect and toll, in
Yes.
my case, of 10 years. you know it's just not enough nail polish in the world for that.
No.
And you really, I think, for me, I hit that wall, and I think that's it, and my body is telling me this is the wall. We
Right.
hitting it, you bumping up against it. And when this last time I went to North Carolina, I spent time with my kids. I played pickleball. It was great. And I have to tell you, as I was driving back to the airport, I there was a part of me there was a physical resistance to returning home. I think I drove around. I drove to the store. I said, well, let me do some errands. Before I even hit because it was just, there's so much resistance to, because you just don't want to be in that space. The
Yeah.
vacation was great,
Right.
but the space is still there. The dynamics is still there. The circumstance, the stress, and it is still there. And so, no, you, as I say, there just coming a time, the burnout, the stress. You can. You can go away for a bit, but if that dynamic is unchanging, you walk right back into that same spot. And that's when I said, you know what? No, I cannot keep doing the same thing.
Yeah, and like we can't. I mean, the situation is hard. Even the best caregiving situation is hard. Your parents are aging,
Hmm.
devastating. It's devastating for them. It's devastating for you. It can be. It's difficult. Uh, Making the situation sustainable is, I think, crucial. And I was talking to, because like I'm also a proponent. Like I don't really believe, especially if you've been caregiving for decades. I don't really believe that you can avoid burnout necessarily. I think, from time to time you get burned out,
Hmm.
but what I think somebody explained it, I forget who, I'll have to find which podcast episode this was, but they were talking about like we're hitting that wall, right? And
Hmm.
as caregivers, we hit the wall. Well, if we're not doing any of these things to help ourselves, to set boundaries, to have a sustainable caregiving situation, then we're hitting that wall race speed.
We are.
But we could bumper car that sucker if we so where when we hit the wall, it's just a nice little like, "Boop, okay, this is the wall. Oh, there's the wall.
Hmm.
Okay, time for a break,"
Hmm.
instead of crash and burn. And I
Hmm.
thought that was a great way to look at it. Like, yeah, we're gonna hit a wall, but we don't have to go running into that wall full speed. We can, the wall's gonna get there because, like in my case, the last 5 years before my mom went into the nursing home, she was in the she went to the hospital 35 times in 5 years. We
Wow.
were in the ER all the time, late nights, all the time. And so yeah, I got burned out.
Hmm. Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
learning to, like, okay, well, until we can come to, eventually what she needed was to be in a nursing home. Guess what? She stopped having to go to the
Hmm.
hospital all the time when she was in the nursing home. But,
Hmm. Yeah.
I made sure to have a situation where when I was going to be up all night, I was able to have a situation where I could rest the next day, that kind of thing. Like
Hmm.
I was able to adjust my schedule accordingly or whatever so that it wasn't scorched earth every time we had an emergency happening.
Right. Right.
Anyway,
Right.
um, I think you're doing an amazing job. Is it Caregiver Collab or the Caregiver Collab? On
The caregiver collaborative.
Okay, and are you on? I've only seen you on TikTok. Are you anywhere else?
I'm only on TikTok right now.
Good for you.
I'm gonna. Okay.
Keep it simple. You know what I'm saying? I'm everywhere and it drives me crazy. Although I am loving Substack. It's a totally different. We can have a conversation about that.
Yeah.
But the Caregiver Collaborative on TikTok, you have been breath of fresh air. If you are a caregiver who is tired of the platitudes, who love your parents, but also they drive you crazy, if you want real talk about caregiving and also some real practical mindset shifts that we can make, Bernadette is your girl. She cracks me up every time. What do you say at the beginning of all your things? You're like, can I tell you something? What do you
Can
say?
I share something with
Can
you?
I share something with you? I love how you start it. Can I share something with you? And you just go right into it. I love that
Yeah.
you show up as you are. You are in the garden. You are in the, you know, chair, in the car, walking to
In the
out.
need of a hairdresser, all of that good stuff.
I love it. That is real. And you know what? I remember when I started doing it, talking more about my caregiving journey online, I was constantly like, exhausted at the end of the day, sometimes like in my bed, opening up my phone and it was, because I had worked in marketing, I was kind of shy about doing that. And then I
Hmm.
realized, no, that's about every caregiver. That's how every caregiver ends their day. They're curled up in bed.
Curl up in bed, lying flat, going, "Oh my
Yeah.
gosh."
They're like, they're looking, it's relatable. So,
Eh,
and I think you are very relatable and I have had such a good time talking to you. Is there anything else you want to tell caregivers before we sign off today?
yeah. Replace that guilt with grace.
Yes.
Let go of that guilt.
Yeah.
It serves no one. It pays no bills. It will not add one more day to your life. Let it go. Replace that with grace. You deserve. and you do not have to ask anybody permission for make out space for your existence in this world.
Uh, all right. Well, thank you, Bernadette. And thank you for joining me today on the From Guilt to Good podcast. To access additional caregiver resources, support our show, and connect with us on social media, check out the show notes. I'll also have Bernadette's TikTok handle there for you. We are changing the conversation about caregiving one episode at a time. And remember, you can be a good caregiver and still have a life outside of caring for others. Thank you.